Kia ora, and welcome to my daily course. I'm Bernard Hickey for the Kaka. This is my email newsletter and podcast and video that goes out with a Substack email newsletter, and it's called the Kaka, and it's all about Aotearoa's political economy around housing, climate, and poverty. Today I wanted to talk mostly about whether or not the government will or should or might bail us out whenever there's a massive climate event that wrecks the land that we might be living on. Now, this is all very topical, of course. We saw this during the Cyclone Gabrielle and the Auckland anniversary floods in 2023, when a whole bunch of people suddenly realised that their home was unlivable as the climate warms. They were too close to a river or a floodplain or the sea, and it wasn't safe for them to live in it permanently. And in that case, they were given so-called a red notice, or they were essentially red zoned, using the language of the Christchurch earthquake. And many of those received payouts from councils. Much of that was funded by the government. That cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, the big question for any government is what happens with the next big climate event, which are now going to be more frequent, more intense, and more expensive. Should homeowners know that if they are washed out or their place is red zoned after the next big event, should they know if they're going to be bailed out and that the government's going to buy that land off them? Or should they take precautions, i.e. move or not buy the house in the first place, or create their own stock banks or whatever it is to mitigate the risks? Now, this goes to the heart of the issue when it comes to moral hazard. If you're taking an investment risk and you think that a government will always bail you out in the end, you tend to take riskier decisions. And this is the issue we're facing at the moment, because the government and the previous government, so both Labor and National, have tried to grapple with this idea of climate adaptation. How do we organise ourselves and build in places, move away from places, build stock banks, repair bridges, all of those things? How are we going to do that? Who's going to pay for it? When's it going to happen? What assumptions should we make? And for politicians so far, it's been tempting to just kick it off into the long weeds, or a couple of decades away, to say, well, we don't know, and it's too difficult for us to make a decision, and we'll make it up as we go along. That's effectively what happened during Cyclone Gabrielle. So one of the core issues is, should the government guarantee or provide some sort of assurance or guidance about if or when it provides a bailout for red zoned properties after the next big storm? And that's what we focused on today, because the Climate Change Minister, Simon Watts, put out a document yesterday on climate adaptation, which didn't directly address this issue in a very useful way in the document itself. But in the Cabinet papers, we discover, thanks to the great reporting from Mark Dalder, that there is a much clearer view on whether the government thinks that it needs to provide this guarantee and how it should address it. The trouble is, it also lacks clarity and leaves open the risk that people will try it on and hope that the next time it happens that they can plead innocence and get the next bailout. Let's go through what has actually happened, along with the latest news of the day and a few little snippets. So let's look at what's going on there. today. Simon Watts quoted in this cabinet paper as saying, in the near term, the government must begin to reset expectations of its role in providing financial assistance where homeowners suffer significant losses after a major event. That sounds clear, but the phrase must begin to reset is difficult. Either you're bailing them out or you're not. And if you're not bailing them out fully, a partial bailout is a dangerous thing to assume. And here's the words we're getting in a further interview that Simon Watts gave to Mark Dulder, where he said, the strongest signal we will send is any decisions relating to financial assistance if the next major event occurs before formal policy is in place. So he's saying, we'll start to give you an idea. He says then, I don't think it's straight to zero in the next event. Well, could be quite soon. And the question is, you don't think you go from 100 to zero in the next event, leaves open a lot of doubt. So let's have a look at what he said in the cabinet paper for those people who are wondering if they can feel lucky. So in some instances, he writes in the cabinet paper, resilience measures may be a part of the response. And then he goes on to say, central government's objective is not to fully cover losses suffered, but to mitigate genuine hardship. Well, what is genuine hardship? Is it, I had no idea I was living next to a floodplain, or I bought this land for a large amount of money and I'm not going to take a loss on it. It's not my fault that it rained. Well, maybe it was your fault for buying the property in the first place, knowing that it was on a floodplain. Or maybe you thought it might be, but you didn't want to be able to be accused of making that decision deliberately, so you chose not to really know the details. Or there may have been people who were there for 50 years before the idea of climate change existed. So it's a tough one. So do you feel lucky? And is this, for you, a TUI billboard? Is the Crown going to bail me out or not? Simon Watts seems to be saying not, but not right now. And that's the problem here. No one really wants to take the pain because, of course, the moment you say never from now, that is a collapse in property values. And it's often more convenient to leave these things in a state of plausible deniability, constructive confusion, however you wanted to describe it. Now, a couple of things to point to in today's email newsletter I thought was interesting. A good deep dive in RNZ about the case of Navjot Singh, who was born in New Zealand in 2007 after the 2006 law was passed saying that the children of overstayers would not have citizenship rights, so no access to healthcare or education. Navjot Singh is now a teenager and has not been to school because he was the child of an overstayer. And as Ricardo Menendez March rightly says, and remember we've got 20,980 overstayers now, according to Immigration New Zealand, those people should have some rights, or at least not be made vulnerable to exploitation. So that is something to keep an eye on. In the papers today, a lot of the coverage is, of course, of the passing of Jim Bolger. Interesting piece from Janae Tibshraeny, a follow-up to the speech from Paul Conway on Wednesday. The Post obviously goes with Jim Bolger as well and follows up with its own scoop from the previous day that John Key says a bed tax is needed. And we also see a warning about it, mortgage rates from Infometrics reported in the press. We've got Gareth Kiernan saying that interest rates could go up quite quickly if inflation gets out of control. Rob Stock doing a good piece there on what happens next on the climate adaptation. The flood map is the key thing next. Well, you can actually get them now. It's just that they're not very widely used. And of course, knowing about things can be a dangerous thing. And for example, there's already been cases taken to the court by residents who want to stop this information from getting onto land information memorandums, LIMS, and these are fights that will come. In the ODT, interesting piece from Matthew Littlewood on Treasury advice saying that the Te Pūkenga breakup wasn't very well planned by Penny Simmons. Also some news out of the government, $90 million for flood protection schemes. In the Taranaki Daily News, rightly, a local boy does good, Jim Bolger. And an interesting story there in Hamilton in the Waikato Times about various measures to get new houses built and the constant and familiar refrain we're seeing about the tension between developers and the council who pays for the infrastructure. RNZ today leading with Simeon Brown shaking his fist at the doctors and planning some law changes, and that Gareth Ken warning also on RNZ. Stuff is a very interesting piece and quite heartening piece about a man who hasn't had a conviction from decades ago who couldn't get a job, and now it looks, because of the publicity, he looks like he will get a job, which is great. Newsroom, again, Mark Dalder has that excellent piece on the assumption of buyouts and risks. And Sam Slashdeva has a scoop about a New Zealand man who's been sanctioned by the British government for his involvement in Ukraine. Good roundup from Lyric Wairiri Smith about the dramas around Te Pāti Māori. And Patrick Smelly has some more information on power prices. And Andy McDonald looks at how the opening up of the banking sector to fintechs is going. Surprise, surprise, there are some blockages. And interest.co.nz has an interesting story from Bill English saying that the days of guaranteed capital gains in the housing market are over, essentially saying there's no need for capital gains tax now because there won't be any capital gains. Actually, he said something similar about 10 years ago, and since then prices have exploded. But I do agree with him that it's unlikely you're going to get much money out of a capital gains tax from here, or at least not very quickly. And the cartoon today from overseas, excellent, from Morton Moreland in the Times. Vladimir Zelensky's heading for Washington, hoping to get some Tomahawk missiles to throw across the border at Russia. And the joke, of course, is that he'll have to take something with him. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was today's Daily Chorus for Friday, October the 17th. Ka kite anō.